Welcome to the Lowe Post podcast on a Monday morning. Holy crap! What just happened? I wasn't even planning on doing an episode today because, Warriors-Lakers, which is the mega series, resumes tonight. And then James Harden, after reverting to postseason James Harden, had in game 4 a must-win. Philadelphia staring its demise for the season and staring all sorts of postseason implications of James Harden and Joel Embiid and Doc Rivers staring it all in the face. Has maybe his second greatest postseason game of all time. A few days after having his greatest postseason game of all time, hits a game-winning corner three on a bizarre defensive sequence from the Celtics, followed by an even more bizarre failure to get a shot off by a second Marcus Smart. Oh my God. And then you kind of exhale, you go have your dinner. There's a dinner break between games. Okay, Nuggets, Suns. That's fun. We're going to see some scoring. And then Nikola Jokic shoves Mat Ishbia at the end of the second quarter, with Mat Ishbia holding the ball, for some reason holding the ball. And then before we get into any legality analysis, the all-time best flop by a non-player that I can recall. He looked like a grandpa after a long day gardening, plopping into his recliner, just hands up, mouth agape. It's just incredible work by Mat Ishbia, who then realizes all the cameras are going to be on him and is stone-faced like, yeah, I'm good. Just unbelievable. Oh, and by the way, Devin Booker hasn't missed a shot in 3 weeks. The Suns won 129-124. Nikola Jokic had 53 points. Devin Booker and Kevin Durant combined for 72 points, one game after combining for 86 points. And that series is tied 2-2. Kirk Goldsberry, what the hell is going on?
Oh my God, the playoffs. The playoffs are back. One of the best playoff days in years. That was such a magnificent demonstration of why we love the NBA. That Suns Nuggets game had everything, man. It was just heavyweight fight. It had the sort of weird off-court drama. Where do you want to begin, Zach? That was one of the best Sundays we've had in the NBA in a long time. Where are we starting, dude?
Well, first of all, Knicks Heat, you resume tonight. We will get to you. Kind of a boring game 3 with Jimmy Butler coming back, a blowout Heat win. Lakers Warriors, we will get to you. You resume tonight. Great, massive game 3 destruction by the Lakers after Darvin Ham switched up his defensive assignments, putting Austin Reeves on Steph Curry and Jared Vanderbilt on Draymond Green to switch the Steph Draymond pick and roll. Those, when Jeff Van Gundy and I previewed the series on this podcast, those are the matchups I predicted the Lakers would use, and I look like a fool for 2 games. Now they are using those, and now we'll see how the Warriors counter. I think the Warriors counter is just going to have to be more Draymond at center without JaMychal Green and just more shooting. But we'll get to that series later. We got to start with Suns Nuggets, and we got to start with the shove flop heard around the world.
The Sombor shover.
I can't abide by that. We're gonna the Sombor shuffle is the Jokic shot. That should be the only Sombor thing that we have. So, Kirk, there is now another should he be suspended debate after the Draymond Green should he be suspended debate against Sacramento. And I came down on I did not want Draymond, did not want Draymond suspended. They won the series anyway. And there is hearkening back to the karmic justice of the 2007 Suns against your beloved Spurs and the Robert Horry hip check of Steve Nash, in which several Suns, including Amari Stoudemire and Boris Diaw, were subsequently suspended, leading to kind of a letdown series win for the Spurs after what had been a barn burner. And they were suspended for leaving the bench during an altercation, a hard and fast black and white rule that was ironically written into the league rules after another brawl in Phoenix involving the Knicks and the Suns when Greg Anthony zoomed off the bench in the ugliest shirt that anyone has ever worn to an NBA game, which is a high standard, and sucker punched Kevin Johnson. And so here we are all these years later with now Suns fans saying, well, hold on. If that was an automatic suspension and Jokic touched a fan, now Mat Ishbia is not really a fan. He's the owner of the Phoenix Suns. And I actually think that cuts toward Jokic's advantage and the Nuggets' advantage in this case. He's not a normal fan. He should know better than to hold the ball like he's on the side of the playground and the ball just rolled to him. And just like, I get to keep this thing for a little while, but that's it. We'll set that aside for a second. Jokic touched a fan. Another fan was thrown out. I'm not sure he quote unquote entered the stands, but he entered an area where the crowd could touch him and he could touch the crowd. He was assessed a technical foul. Tony Brothers later said after the game that he deliberately shoved a quote unquote fan. I like how everyone had to pretend that it was just a fan. He shoved a fan. Just say who it was. And so here we are with this potential idea that the league could suspend Nikola Jokic for Game 5. And Kirk, it's not an exaggeration to say the NBA championship could rest on this ruling to the degree that there is going to be any kind of ruling. Certainly this series could rest on this ruling because, yes, Denver's going home. Yes, they've played a good series. The Suns have played an outstanding last 2 games. Home, it doesn't matter where the game is. If Jokic doesn't play, I don't think they can beat the Phoenix Suns and in any one game in which the Suns are playing full throttle to win. And then that would give the Suns a 3-2 lead heading home. I mean, whether you think the winner of this series is the favorite in the next series, the favorite in the finals, whatever it is, it's de facto true that a suspension of Nikola Jokic for a Game 5 could tilt the NBA championship. Do you think he should be suspended?
Hell no. No, I would be very disappointed. I love how you connected the dots with the 2007 thing. That would just be a big letdown, the word you used. I mean, Jokic painted a masterpiece in spite of whatever happened on the sideline there. What do you have, 50-something and 11 and best player on the court except for Devin Booker, who I'm sure we're going to talk about. You can't do it. And one of the things I love about Mat Ishbia is people forget he's a national champion. He played for the Michigan State Spartans in a very deep reserve role when they won the national championship. He played with Morris Peterson and Mateen Cleaves in that team. The dude knows his way around ball. He's not just some random finance owner. He felt natural with the ball in his hand. I don't think he was doing anything trolly, but he might have been. He might have been. I'll allow for it. He looked to me like he was just concerned about Josh Okogie, who just careened into the seats and looking for the health and well-being of that player. And if Jokic was out of line on anything, it was like sort of storming over there and demanding the basketball be returned to the playing surface while Okogie's still, being tended to there. No, short answer, no. Let's see Game 5. Let's not lose sight of it. That was one of my favorite basketball games in years, period. 2 masterpieces, if not 3, if you count like Durant and Jamal Murray's play and the bench play. This is a great series. I just want everybody whole going back to Denver for what promises to be maybe the best Game 5 of this whole playoffs. Let's not screw with that.
So on NBA Today last Friday, we talked about the state of Suns Nuggets and what Chris Paul's absence would mean for the Suns. And CJ McCollum was on the show and he said, yeah, I think the Damian Lees and Terrence Rosses and TJ Warrens of the world, the Suns role players will need to step up. And they did. And the Suns went all in on shooting, which has been the right move for them. We'll talk about that. And I said, look, CJ, that's cool, man. I guess they do have to step up. Here's the reality. I think Booker and Durant are going to have to combine for 70 points in all these games for them to win. And that's a tall order. And they exceeded it in both games. I just want to, before we get back to legalese, here are the stats for the 3 best players in this series through 4 games. Nikola Jokic, 36.5 points on 57% shooting, 9.5 assists, 14 rebounds. 36.5, 14 and 9.5. Devin Booker, 36.3 points on 64% shooting, 57% on threes, 9 assists as he's playing point book almost full time now, 5 rebounds. Kevin Durant just checking in at a quiet 32 a game on 47% shooting. I mean, what these three guys are doing is absolute insanity, possession by possession by possession. So here's the deal. You want the deal here? I don't think Jokic should be suspended, and I don't think he will be suspended. Should we go through the precedent and the legalities to the degree that it exists?
Yeah, I mean, I hope you're right. And my favorite Devin Booker stat, pulled by our friend Matt Williams at ESPN, Devin Booker has 331 points in the 2023 playoffs, the most through a player's first 9 games of a postseason since Michael Jordan in 1990. He is shooting over his last 2 games 78%. His stat line in the last 2 games looks like a Patrick Mahomes Super Bowl stat line for passing. He's like 38-45 or something ridiculous. He, in a series where Jokic is playing maybe one of his best series of all time, is the best player. So Devin Booker has elevated his game. And yes, anything, I'll be territorial of this series and protective. I will be outraged if they suspend Jokic just for basketball reasons, just as a fan who can't wait to watch these guys play again in game 5. So I don't think anything should happen. Like you said, I don't think anything will happen. And I'd also add, I pray that nothing happens.
Favorite little moment of announcing moment of game 4 was when Spiro Davis said that Booker was 32 of 40 on his last 40 shots. It made 32 of his last 40 shots. And Grant Hill's brain like broke for half a second. He was like, wait, hold up, what? And like the game was going on and Grant Hill couldn't process 32 of 40. So here's the deal. The leaving the bench during an altercation thing, that's a rule. That's a clear written rule. You are automatically suspended. This is not that. This is a distinct situation for which there is no clear hard and fast rule or hard and fast precedent. Every year, the league sends all 30 teams in the players union something called a player conduct memo. The memo is referenced in the CBA. It's not in the CBA, but it's referenced in the CBA. And it outlines all the kind of penalties for violence in the game and all the things that are discouraged. And so here's the relevant language to the degree that any of this is really relevant. I mean, there's no clear sort of guidance on this particular thing, but there is let me find it. Any player who deliberately enters the spectator stands during a game will be automatically ejected and subject to a fine and or suspension. If a player, blah, 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 the first row of the seats is considered the beginning of the stands. Now, Jokic was not ejected. That's over. He stayed in the game. Suns won the game. So that part's over. Whether you think he entered the stands or didn't enter the stands, where the stands exists, what is life, what constitutes, whatever, like wherever you fall on when the stands begin, the language in there is not automatic suspension as it is for the players leaving the bench during an altercation. It is fine and or suspension. Later in the memo, item number 9, players are prohibited from stimulating or encouraging crowd disorder. This has been flagged for me by multiple people today. Any player who engages in such misconduct will be subject to a technical foul, ejection, again, that did not happen, a fine not to exceed $50,000, and or a suspension. So again, whether you think that that's what Jokic did and that is a section that was flagged for me, again, it's not a black and white suspension. It's not. It's a fine and or suspension. And furthermore, as I prepare my closing argument, if you go look at the history to the degree that it exists of player fan physical touching confrontations that are not like the Malice in the Palace, a fine is typically what happens. So I think the most relevant precedent I could find during a 2015 Bulls Cavs playoff game, Joakim Noah was walking through the tunnel after the game. and a fan sitting right above that railing that overlooks the tunnel said something he didn't like, and Noah reached up and kind of slapped him on the shoulder. Fine, $25,000. Fine. That was the closest one I could find. There was also a few years ago, remember Yusuf Nurkic took a fan's phone and threw it against the Indiana Pacers? That was a fine, not a suspension. So I think the precedent here leads toward fine, especially when you consider this is not a normal fan. He should not have been holding the ball. Jokic maybe shouldn't have gone to take it from him, but it's just a completely bizarre situation that did not escalate. Neither one of them really went to escalate it unless you really care about that little chicken wing. I don't think he should be suspended. I don't think he will be suspended, especially in light of Mat Ishbia just tweeting as we are on this podcast. Great win for the Suns last night in an amazing series so far. Darn right, Matt. That should be and is the only story. Suspending or fining anyone over last night's incident would not be right. I have a lot of respect for Jokic and don't want to see anything like that. Excited for Game 5. Go Suns. By the way, thumbs up Mat Ishbia for not trying to win this series with the suspension. So I think all the legal analysis that I just went through this morning is now null and void, given that the owner of the Suns, who was shoved and flopped, has called for no suspension. I think this is going to be much ado about nothing, and I hope that's true.
It should be. And I would say I didn't know about that language until you read it. It's almost like, do you really want to make these things like so cut and dry that now you've painted yourself into a corner, NBA league office? Now you're going to have people on the Suns, maybe not Ishbia, but other back channeling people going to the league. Hey, didn't this memo, isn't this the letter of the law here? Isn't this thing? So they could be playing good cop, bad cop. I hope that Ishbia's sort of sentiment plays out and wins out here. But that language you read is actually pretty intriguing, because, Zach, I'd ask you this, now that you've read that multiple times and you're hearing from multiple people, if they followed the letter of the law here, wouldn't this mean a suspension?
No, I don't. I disagree.
Okay.
The fine and or suspension gives them the wiggle room to just make it a fine. And the precedent I cited with Noah specifically is a fine, and Nurkic is a fine. I don't think. Again, the fine and or suspension to me gives them the out to just say it's a fine. Just fine them. That's it.
The ejection part of that was also interesting that you were reading, because that seems to me like they should have ejected Jokic last night, which would have been a travesty. Let me be clear. That was a bad scene, and I don't know. But the other thing with the ball that I think is telling is Mat Ishbia holding the ball. If that ball comes to me or you, we're probably getting rid of it as fast as we can in that moment. Like, I'm definitely
not holding it. Like,
yeah. It takes a special person, a special fan with a lot of juice to feel like they should be holding the basketball in that moment. So, but yeah, I think
I'll guarantee you this. There are people who work for the Suns who saw that tweet, probably knew he was going to tweet it, and said, God damn, can we at least leave the door a little bit open? Because I don't really care how we win this damn thing. If we win it, that's all that people are going to really remember. Can we just win? I don't know. But those people hopefully are going to lose this litigation. Can we talk about the series now?
Would be nice to, yeah.
So to me, the biggest changes, there are 3 of them that juice the Suns offense back up to beyond its normal levels. After struggling in Denver, they scored 128 points per 100 possessions in Phoenix. And they did it, by the way, with a shot selection that is no different than it has been for the entirety of the playoffs. Not a lot of threes, nothing at the basket, not a lot of free throws, tons of mid-range jumpers. It's not a sea change in that way. So here are the 3 things. Number 1, without Chris Paul, they ran like all hell. Every chance they got, they played faster. And if you look at the data, they're faster by a second or almost 2 in some cases off misses, off makes, off turnovers in these games versus the first 2 games. And I think there's at least some linkage there between not having Chris Paul and playing faster. It also shifted all of the ball handling to Booker and Durant, but much more so Booker, which took away the lone segment of drop back coverage that the Nuggets had decided they could play with Jokic in this series, which was against Chris Paul. Everything was 2 on the ball. Change number 2, linked to that, Monty Williams said, if we're going down with our shooters. That's it. Josh Okogie, your minutes are going to be limited if they're just helping off you. And there's going to be no Torrey Craig, no Ish Wainwright. It's going to be Terrence Ross. It's going to be TJ Warren. It's going to be Landry Shamet, who was just absolutely massive with 5 or 6 threes. I think 5 in game 4 the other night. And we're just going to spread you out. We're going to spread you out. And all of those, you're making really long rotations, Denver. You've been on point the whole series. Your timing's been on point. The more stress we put on you, the quicker it's got to be, the longer the rotations have to be, the more your timing is going to wobble a little bit. And there's going to be a little bit of wobbling and a little bit of uh-oh. And when you double Devin Booker, when Devin Booker has Michael Porter Jr. on him and you're doubling that every time when he gets that cross match, because Booker's guarding Michael Porter Jr. on the other end. Well, now those doubles are pain. Those doubles are swing, open 3 from a good shooter. When you double Durant in the post, swing, open 3 from a good shooter. And we are betting that your team is not built to hunt those guys on the other end of the floor. We're sacrificing wing defense because we think the way you play centered around Murray and Jokic is not built to make those guys feel pain on Michael Porter Jr., on Aaron Gordon, on Bruce Brown. That's a big thing for Denver going forward, is to find a way to make those guys feel some pain. And we can talk about that. And the third thing, Jock Landale is plus 22 for the series. DeAndre Ayton is minus 38. And I honestly thought the Suns fans were going to boo him out of the building in game 3 when he finished everything soft at the rim, when Bruce Brown just yoinked the rebound right out of his hands, when he was blowing his rim protection assignments over and over again. And I thought he actually amped up his energy in game 4. He opened the game with 3 offensive rebounds. He actually tried to dunk on a pick and roll and drew a foul. I know it's a miracle. DeAndre Ayton tried to dunk. His rim protection was better, and yet they still cut his minutes in favor of Landale, who's just tough and gritty and will like go to the rim and do stuff. And his defense has been on point. And win or lose this series, the Ayton situation is even more precarious now in Phoenix. And I actually don't think they can win the series unless he wakes the hell up and plays a little bit better. So you pick one of those things: Chris Paul, shooting, Ayton, and take it from here.
Oh, man. I mean, Ayton, poetically, to his credit, ripped the ball away in one of the key sequences at the end of game 4 when he was closing the game. But I do think the biggest, craziest development, and there's a couple things. Yeah, Phoenix looked like a different beast on offense. But give credit to my friend Monty Williams. The craziest development, if I had to pick one of these that you just highlighted, is the emergence of these newish rotations. Monty tinkering with who's playing and who's not playing. I remember coming on this show, the last 2 times I've been on this show, we were like, who's the 5th guy? And we're like, oh, it's Torrey Craig. And then last time I was on, it's like, who's 6, 7, and 8? Isn't that the real concern here? They don't have depth. Well, that 40-point bench performance last night, Zach, to me is sort of the secret in a game that'll be remembered for the heavyweight toe-to-toe Booker, Jokic, Durant stuff. It was Landry Shamet, Terrence Ross, Landale, TJ Warren. These were the exact pieces that we were really questioning in our playoff previews with the Phoenix Suns. Like, this team is so top heavy. Who is going to score? Are they going to be? Well, last night was the exact game you need at home in a playoff series against a great team. If you want to win, they got their role players. And I loved what you said about Shamet getting the playing time. Again, credit to Monty. We're going down with our shooters, like you said. And it reminded me of Grant Williams in that game 7 against Milwaukee. Well, let's see if Grant Williams can beat us. Well, okay, give these shooters open threes in 2023. There's a chance you're going to give up 18 points from one role player out there in the corners. And that's what sort of Shamet did. And he took advantage of it, and give credit to Point Book. So if you would have told me at the beginning of the series that Chris Paul was going to get hurt and there would be a game where the Phoenix bench would score 40 points, I would have told you were nuts based on what I'd seen from this team in this sort of Durant era, the whopping sample of 15 games we'd had or whatever. So I think that's the most unusual development where I'd put my hand up and say, I did not see this coming. Landale, Shamet, and credit to Monty to tinkering to get to that outcome. And if they can they do it in the road? Is this one of those cliche NBA moments? These guys are only going to be able to do that in Phoenix. But to me, yeah, the bench and the getting the 3-point shooting from the role player and Shamet was a huge part of that win in Game 4.
TJ Warren is plus 28 in 49 minutes for the series. Terrence Ross is plus 22 in either 30 or 36. I can't read my handwriting and I don't have it in front of me. I write like an insane person.
Yeah, I would have not seen that stuff. Those are the kinds of numbers. And let the Landale plus minus. What planet would you have? What planet are we on? I would have never saw that coming.
I like Jock Landale. Last night, man. Last night was like euphoric. Booker's just pulling. There was 1 3 where they doubled him, and he was just like, I don't.
Over to those 2 guys at the top.
And if you freeze it, they both have their hands up. Like it's a good double closeout, and it doesn't even matter. He's racing the ball up in transition without an advantage and just being like, oh, I got to take a floater here. Fine. They're all going in. Jokic in the third quarter, just in one quarter, he scored as the ball handler in a pick and roll with Aaron Gordon. He scored on a give and go cut from the top of the arc. He scored from the post where he's just feasting and they're letting him feast, which we'll talk about. He scored on when they switched the Murray Jokic pick and roll, and Murray is so good at getting those switches. He goes hard and draws Ayton and says, you got to switch on me. Kick to Jokic. He's got Shamet or somebody on him. Pump, go, drive, score. He scored on a quarterback keeper, a fake handoff. It was like he took a pin down and made a jump shot. It was like every possible way a human can score in one quarter. This 7-foot dude who can't jump scored in all the ways while throwing every pass in the book. It was euphoric. Like it was just like you just watched the game giggling like an idiot.
Yeah. Then he had that and one too. And it was like, but yeah, the Booker heat check third quarter. That I think the one we're describing with the double team at the top of the arc was just like third 3 in like 7 possessions or something.
And they're not even touching rim.
Dude, and he had some mid-range ones where you're watching him shoot it and you're like, no, Devin, you're not that hot. And then it goes in and you're like, Jesus, man, like this is one of the best jump shooting performances I've ever seen in the NBA playoffs, period. Devin Booker, I had it in my notes. Okay, so here's how he's getting to. So first player to record 300 points and 70% true shooting percentage over a 9-game span in playoffs all time. He's 78% in the restricted area, 68% in the paint. I had a stat the other day on Instagram. I think he's 3rd in the playoffs in paint scoring. He's 61% from mid-range. You're not supposed to do that. And he's 51% from 3. He's scoring at all 3 levels at elite levels, and it was in big moments. The volume combined with the efficiency is insane. In a game where Jokic, in any normal playoff game, puts up that stat line, has those plays like you just described in that third quarter, and somehow Jokic is the second bullet point in that game because that's how great Devin Booker was.
Just incredible performances by all 3 of these guys, and like Jamal Murray feels quiet in comparison. And
I thought he was going to take over that game in the second quarter, Zach. Like he was going pretty good in the first half, and the fact that he can be that good and be the 4th best shooter or scorer in this series is just something like I can't remember ever seeing.
And he's got, when they play these point book lineups with Shamet and no campaign and no Okogie's guarding Jamal Murray. That's why Okogie is starting in the series. He's got Shamet on him. He's cooking that matchup all the time. And the Phoenix is just giving it to him because they have no better options. And I honestly wonder if they should let him cook a little bit more, just one-on-one sometimes, just to mix it up. The thing about Denver's defenses in these 2 games, I'm not even sure what they're supposed to do. I don't think they're even defending that badly. Jokic is coming up to the point of the screen. They're putting 2 on the ball. They're making Booker give it up. The Suns are just spacing the floor with shooters in all the right places. the rotations are more or less, I mean, they screwed up a couple of rotations out of double teams where someone was either Aaron Gordon once, and I think Jokic once was supposed to zoom over to a corner shooter and they didn't do it. But for the most part, their pick and roll defense is like they're nailing all the rotations. Everything's pretty good. They have good defenders guarding these guys in Aaron Gordon and KCP and Bruce Brown and Christian Brown. And the Suns are just an awesome offensive team when they have all 4 3-point shooters, a rim runner, and Kevin Durant and Devin Booker handling the ball. The one thing I will say is, and we saw glimpses of it, but not much. I bet in game 5, assuming Jokic plays, we're going to see a little bit of Jokic on campaign, and we're going to see a little bit of Jokic on TJ Warren, and inverting the matchups that way. And even if we don't, I think they're going to start to treat those guys like they treat a Kogi and just say, who's ever guarding you, we're those two in particular, you're going to have to make threes before we start giving you the respect that we've been giving you in previous games. In game 3, they did mess around with something like a matchup zone where they kind of let Jokic hang back and hand off assignments to sit on the back line, and sometimes just had him guarding random guys instead of guarding the screen setter. And I thought it actually, in fits and starts, worked pretty well. I bet we'll see a little bit more, just like, we're not going to just play traditional pick and roll defense every single time because you guys are just too good. We're going to move our pieces around. The other question is, if they're going to play Shamet, and I mentioned Murray going at him, if they're going to play Ross, if they're going to play Warren, Denver has got to find a way to hurt those guys. And when your whole offense is Murray, Jokic pick and roll and Jokic post ups, both of which, I mean, their offense is not a problem at all. I'm giving them offensive advice. They scored 120 points for 100 possessions in Phoenix. I do think there are other vehicles to hurt those guys, and I'm interested to see sort of what the coaching staff lands on. But it's become a fascinating series.
Mike Malone gave some incredible post-game quotes. My favorite being when he was asked about Mat Ishbia, and if that's different, that it's an owner, and he said, "I don't give a shit." But his second quote, to your point, after the game, quick to come out, and he's one of these great coaches, Zach, reads the box score at the table and gives you some quick insights. But he was looking at it, and he was looking at the Suns' numbers, just going through the categories, and he was rattling off their stats, and he concluded, we didn't take anything away from this Phoenix offense. In the first 2 games, Denver had a defensive rating of 102. That's great. That would have led the league, I think, this year in the regular season against this incredible offense. In games 3 and 4 was 128. So that would have been worst in the league. Credit to Booker. You already hit all the points. But I think the larger point is Denver's got to at least take something away from this Suns offense. I don't know how you stop Devin Booker right now. I'm not sure there's a way to stop Kevin Durant ever, although Aaron Gordon, I think, is doing a pretty good job.
He's getting one of the things that changed in the last 6 quarters, and I think it's specifically like the last 6, is that Durant has kind of not figured out, but Gordon was giving him a lot of problems with his physicality at the beginning of the series. The last 3 halves, KD has started to look a little bit more comfortable using his quickness to get space in that matchup. And that's been a little bit of like part of the reason the pendulum has swung, I think.
Yeah, getting like down to the blocks for the mid-ranger, like the 7, 10, 12-foot mid-rangers, getting them off the bounce. I agree with that. I don't think we're going to get Devin Booker and Kevin Durant contained. I think that's a hot take, right? No, I don't think, but they're going to have to take something away, because you're not going to win when your defensive rating's 128. You're just not going to do that. And that was, to be fair, my concern, and why I picked the Suns to come out of the West, is I thought they would do this to a lot of defenses. So I'm not really mad at Denver's defense, but if they want to win 2 of the next 3, they have to have a couple of more games like they had in game 1 and 2, where they were able to contain the whole Phoenix offense to a degree that made those games winnable.
I mean, part of the reason they were able to do that was they played shaky shooters much more, and it made the rotations much easier. It made the schemes much easier. It's much harder without those guys on the floor. It's going to be a challenge for them, and I think we'll see.
Yeah, sorry. One
No,
other
go ahead.
nerdy stat, Zach, is they blitzed a lot more on these screens in game 4. Denver did. They blitzed 29 screens according to Second Spectrum after doing that just 17 times in the first 3 games. So they are tinkering with schemes, but they got absolutely torched when they did that in game 4. I think it was 1.5 points per chance when they were doing that, which is a losing number, and suggests that you probably shouldn't do that to Devin Booker or Kevin Durant anymore. But they're tinkering. And just like Monty tinkered and found something better here in these last 2 games, like it's up to Mike Malone now to go back home and get that defensive rating back to where it was in those first 2 games, despite, like you said, now you're facing a new cast of role players that's more dangerous from the perimeter than that defensive-minded group that Monty had started the series with.
I think part of it will be trying to make them feel a little more pain on defense. No pun intended.
Right.
Pain. And again, like that's easier said than done given the personnel. But I think one way to do it is run a little bit more your split game with Jokic holding the ball and run those guys, run those bad defenders through picks and back screens. And they actually got a Jamal Murray dunk in game 3 out of that when Ross and Shamet, I think, messed up a switch. That's one way to do it. And I think we'll see a bunch of little adjustments like that. And by the way, if Denver does go to its gimmick defense, if Jokic does go on TJ Warren a little bit or a Kogi a little bit, Phoenix will just use those guys in the pick and roll. It's a little trickier because if they roll, they're rolling into Ayton's territory. It gets a little clunky, but they can do it. It's just going to be a really interesting chess match because we knew this series was going to be about which defense could just stop the bleeding a little bit. And in the first 2 games, it was Denver. In the most recent 2 games, it was nobody, and Phoenix just scored more points. And I think Phoenix has some more levers to pull on offense. The interesting thing about, we've been harping on like why is Durant not more involved in the pick and roll game as a ball handler and as a screener?
Yeah.
And one of the reasons is because without Chris Paul, Denver is not totally content enough. If they just ran a Booker Durant 2-man game, they would just switch it because that's KCP and Aaron Gordon. And they're willing to live with those matchups flipped around. Chris Paul Durant is a different story. And we saw some campaign Durant pick and rolls last night to try to get guards switched on to Durant. I think that's something I would tap into with or without Chris Paul. And by the way, if Chris Paul comes back in this series, he's going to have to keep up with the way they're playing. He's got to fit into this faster style, and he's got to shoot faster. He's got to shoot not as fast as Shamet shoots, but if he's in the Shamet role, he's got to just let it fly. And he's going to have to keep up with how they're playing. But boy, oh boy, the firepower.
Let me ask you this. 2 questions. Who'd you pick in the beginning of the series?
Suns in 7.
I had Suns and 7s. How do you feel about Suns and 7 now that we've seen 4 of these?
Assuming Jokic does not get suspended, I feel a little bit less. When you pick a long series, you never feel great about who you're picking, right? So I probably feel a little bit less good about it because it has taken such superhuman performances for Phoenix to gut these wins over the finish line. Denver's wins were a little bit easier. And Denver has home court, obviously. But I thought it was a toss-up series going into it, and I still think it's kind of a toss-up series, but it's unfolded obviously much differently in terms of just Chris Paul's injury and some of the other stuff than I had expected. Although we all knew that how Denver would have to defend Phoenix and the challenges of doing that. And the shooting lever by Monty Williams has really been the game changer. Just a fascinating series. Anything else you want to hit on this?
No, you nailed it as usual.
I want to hit 2 more things. One thing on Durant, and he made this adjustment in game 3. He knows that blitz or that hedge is coming, and he started in game 3 to fake toward the pick and kind of bait everyone going that way and then dribble away and reject the pick. And he got layups and fouls out of that. And he continued to do that in game 4. The other thing with Denver, and this is just a fascinating, unanswerable question, and they seem to switch it every couple of games. is whether to just go whole hog and tie Murray and Jokic together for almost every minute they play together, or in some games, including last night, they'll pull Murray in the middle of the first quarter so that he can play all the non-Jokic minutes. And your brain wants to say, well, yeah, you need him on the court when Jokic rests. But if you look at the numbers, they've actually won the minutes when both of them are on the bench for the full playoffs kind of handily. And they're after a roaring start in this series, they're now -12 for the series with Jokic on the bench, which has been their problem all season and was not a problem through 6 games of the playoffs. It's just, there's no great answer to it. My gut says I like the stagger a little bit better. The numbers say I'm wrong. And maybe one of the reasons that it could be wrong is those guys are so good together. It's actually worth risking some minutes with both of them on the bench to maximize the minutes that they do play together. I think that's one of those coaching dilemmas that it's hard to win that one every night.
Last thing I'll say is Michael Porter Jr. needs to have one of these 3 games. He needs to do what Landry Shamet did. He's paid too much money. He's such a great shooter, but that's somebody I'd look forward to having a big game in these last 3 games. I think he could change the outcome of one of them.
And that's where, he's shown a little bit more off the dribble stuff in these playoffs, but he's never been a forceful off the dribble player. He's never been a forceful post player. And that's one of, you can put Terrence Ross on him and he doesn't hurt you. You can put, TJ Warren on him and he's not going to hurt you. I think this series, I was actually worried after the first 2 games and Chris Paul's injury that a series I had been looking forward to for so long was going to kind of peter out. And now it's like, I just need game 5 to begin immediately. And I need Mat Ishbia to have, like, Denver needs to install a velvet rope, like, just around his seat for wherever he sits in game 5. The ushers need to put a velvet rope right there and like a little sign on his seat that has the NBA's flopping rules just attached to his seat. Just unbelievable theater. More unbelievable theater.
Oof.
Sixers Celtics, and boy, oh boy, oh boy. When Marcus Smart hit that trailing 3 with like 2.5 minutes or 2:45 or whatever it was left to put Boston up 102-98 at the end of regulation, and Philly at home after leading by, I don't know what it got up to. It got up to double digits bunch of times actually. Was just walking the ball up, crawling it up. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, Joel, can you screen for me? There's 12 on the shot clock. Oh, okay. Joel's tired. Joel just sort of fades to the 3-point arc, doesn't roll. It's hard work. Joel's coming off an injury. Boom, 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 boom. Guess I got to do something here. Oh, the shot clock's expiring. They had 8 points in the first 10 minutes of the fourth quarter. I think the Sixers, something like that. When that 3 from Smart went in, it just felt like, oh man, here it is. The gut punch, the collapse loss, 3-1 down, no home court advantage. It's done. Here come the Houston rumors. Here come the Embiid trade rumors. Here come the Doc Rivers rumors. And God damn it, the Sixers and James Harden dug in and said, not today. Not today, Satan. Not today. We are saving our season. Harden hit a step back 2 with 2 minutes left. Then he had a later with 2 minutes, 25 seconds left. Then he blew by Malcolm Brogdon. Bad defense by Malcolm Brogdon, giving him his left hand for another layup. Then he tied the game with 15 and a half seconds left on a floater in which very smartly he beat Al Horford on a switch. And very smartly on that play, Doc Rivers put Joel Embiid on one side of the floor and PJ Tucker on the other side of the floor, so they could not switch on the way up to the pick and roll, and James Harden would get Al Horford on a switch. And then Marcus Smart missed an incredible 3 to win the game and effectively win the series. We got overtime. We could talk about the last few possessions of overtime. Where do you want to start on this one? The Marcus Smart almost game-winning shot, the James Harden actually game-winning shot. There's so much to talk about here.
Jeez. one thing I don't want to forget is PJ Tucker's legendary and one that nobody's talking about today,
with
where
50
he also,
something seconds, right?
yeah, after a quintessential Marcus Smart boneheaded step back three on the other end with 90 seconds left. This is the classic kind of Smart shot where Celtics fans are just like, come on, man, not now. But PJ, after a Tobias Harris miss, mid-ranger, again, Joel Embiid's looking passive. Harden has done a lot at that point. It's Tobias's turn. He misses. And if the Celtics collect that rebound, it's pretty much curtains to me. It's a minute left. PJ Tucker comes crashing in and one. And between his field goal, Zach, and his free throw, he manages to give Joel Embiid a pep talk. And then goes and sinks the free throw. So hook 'em horns, unbiased.
He needed the pep talk because Al Horford was eating his lunch on
defense.
defense.
My God.
And
three block shots in that
and
fourth
one of them, it was a long two where it barely got out of Embiid's hand, and Al Horford just made him eat the ball. And you never see that. It's like when Durant gets his shot blocked. It's like, what the hell just happened?
Yeah, if you would have told me one of those two dudes would have blocked the other guy 3 times in a fourth quarter in the series, I think I would have guessed the other way around. But credit to Al Horford, who seems to keep beating Father Time. And he was living in between Joel Embiid's ears there in the clutch in that stretch. And PJ saw it and got to him. But we have to talk about, look, I'm not really critical or like bringing these things down to one game or one possession or one play. But we have to talk about that last possession. The Celtics should have either called timeout or gone faster. It's that simple. They were down one. That possession unfolded like they were tied. I can't emphasize this enough. That is the biggest distinction in that moment. 18, 19 seconds left. You get the ball. If it's tied, you can go slow. If you're down one, you got to go early. And you take a look, you try to take the lead, and you're probably not going to score. And if you don't, well, then you play the foul game. You have another timeout. Now you have another possession down 3 if they make both free throws. That's how we play this out. And so it was a boneheaded move. They went too slow. I rewatched the play 100 times, and I know you did too. The fact that Jason Tatum is still dribbling at the decal with less than 5 seconds left at the 76ers logo is a crime. Like, that was bad on his part, and it was bad on the coaching staff's part. They needed to do something different than they did, and it cost them a lot of win probability. From a nerd's perspective, it cost them win probability points. And I'll say that. And so I will be hard on both the players and the situational awareness of the coaches in that last possession for Boston.
It was a disaster, and it has long been my pet peeve. One of my many, I got a lot of pet peeves, but one of my pet peeves has always been when teams who are trailing bring the ball up as if the game is tied and they have overtime sitting in their pocket. You have to get a shot off. You have to put the referees in play. You have to put offensive rebounding potentially in play. And too many teams are like, oh, we'll just play like it's like they're playing for the last shot. You can't play for the last shot. You've got to score and make the other team take a last second shot. I think it was Derek White set the screen for Tatum on that play. The screen makes contact with 4 seconds left in the game. They got the ball. I believe there were 18.9 seconds left in the game. The screen made contact, 14.9 seconds of nothing. Literally nothing happened of consequence. And it was just inexcusable. That's on everybody. That's on the players. That's on the coaching staff for not realizing the urgency of the situation. And you knew the shot was late. Like Jason Tatum is throwing a diagonal cross-court kick-out pass. If you freeze it, the ball is leaving his hands with 1.4 seconds left in the game. It was somewhat reminiscent of them playing all the way down to the end against Brooklyn in game 1 of the playoffs last year when Smart hit Tatum for that twisting layup. I believe that game was tied. But I have to go back and look at that. Just a disaster of a game ender. And no one will remember the Smart 3 that almost won the game in regulation. That was a great look with plenty of time. generated by Tatum attacking Maxey, which the Celtics have done a million times in this series. And it was right there, and they missed it. I also think we need to talk about the last Philly possession of the game, which was the James Harden corner three that won the game. And again, James Harden is rewriting the story of his career with these games. Now they sandwiched two just classic bad Harden playoff games, but these two games are maybe the two best playoff games of his life. 16 of 23 he shot yesterday. I thought that possession was as much of or more of a disaster than the Celtics' last offensive possession. What stuck out to you on that play?
It looked like Embiid was going to score or get fouled. And I'm not too critical of the Jaylen Brown coming over. The thing I haven't heard talked about too much is PJ was also open on that other corner. And I think, Tobias had sort of sealed Marcus Smart off on the left block, but PJ was open on the other side. But yeah, if you've watched the playoffs the last 10 years, you're not worried about James Harden at the end of these games until, 7 days ago or whatever. And he made the shot that he needed to make. The MVP is there on Jason Tatum at the crown of the restricted area, all 7'3" of them. He looks like he's going to go up, at least get a bucket, maybe an and one, more 2, 3. I'm not mad at Jaylen. And the thing I would say, what stuck out to me was Joel Embiid made a hell of a pass. He noticed who was coming over on the double, and he threw a pass that I don't see him make that much over to that right corner, and then James Harden makes the shot. I'm actually not that mad at that play as much as the other play that we already discussed. What stuck out to you, though, Zach Lowe?
A couple of things. And I've largely been on the side of Joe Mazzulla has done a good job in his first year in Boston. I have not been on the oh my God, he doesn't call timeout, so he's in over his head. He's 34. I think he's been fine. I quibbled with some of his rotation choices. We talked about that a couple episodes ago. That possession, they come out of the timeout, and I noticed right away Smart is on Embiid. And Horford is on PJ Tucker, who's on purpose as far from the action as you could possibly be without standing out of bounds, which is against the rules. Because they know they're thinking Horford might be on him, and they might, try to get Horford involved and help somehow. Let's put PJ Tucker over here. And I understand the Celtics have for good chunks of the series on purpose put Marcus Smart on Joel Embiid. Even Malcolm Brogdon has been on Joel Embiid. And it's, to put them in position to switch a pick and roll. It's to just throw a monkey wrench into Philadelphia's plans and confuse them a little bit. It's because those guys are good at fronting and denying the ball and just making Philadelphia waste time, so that when Embiid gets the ball up the nail, he's got 5 on the shot clock and really not a lot of options to pass if they send help. I get all of that. Fine. I did not get why he was on him in that situation, right. Just giving them a mismatch. And now it ended up being Tatum because they crisscrossed and Tatum switched on to Embiid. Same deal, whatever. They got no shot in the post against Joel Embiid. And I just thought that was getting too cute. And right away I saw that and I was like, I get what they're doing. It feels like this is not the time to get a little cute with the matchups. And sure enough, Al Horford was not involved in the play at all. They just posted Joel Embiid and he mowed over Jason Tatum. And then Jaylen Brown, you might not be mad at him. I just think that's a rotation you can't make. I think that help has got to come from Al Horford. It's got to come from someone on the PJ Tucker, everyone else side of the floor. Everyone else is on that side of the floor. Help from there and count on the rest of your guys to zone up and rotate between whoever else is on that side of the floor. Do not leave the one guy alone in the corner. I understand why he did it. It's an emergency, and it's an emergency because of who you assigned to Joel Embiid. You just gave them a post up and a red carpet to the rim. I hated everything about how Boston defended that possession, everything. And then I hated everything that came after it. And look, again, just as we talked about with Jokic suspension possibilities, which hopefully are gone by the time this podcast posts, like that Smart shot that missed at the end of regulation. These two possessions we're talking about right now.
Yeah.
Like this is the championship odds are swinging on the outcome of these decisions. That's how big this is. These are the two heavyweights left in the East. I know Jimmy Butler is in God mode and right there with Devin Booker and Nikola Jokic, and they're turning the NBA playoffs into their personal freaking birthday parties. But like, I know that whoever wins this series is going to be heavily favored to win the next round. Heavily favored. This is a game that if this and game one without Embiid, when the Celtics defense was awful the whole game. These are losses they're going to look back on if they don't win the title this year. If they don't get out of this series, and just if they don't get out of this series, they're going to have so much regret. Now, they still have home court. They're still in good shape. They're still the favorites. Joel does not look 100%, which is big for Boston. But that's how big these moments are and how important they are. They are championship-altering moments.
Yeah, Joel does not look 100%, and that's a big headline here. When you look at the statistics of this 4-game series in the second round of these playoffs, this is the most lopsided series of the 4. And the fact that it's 2-2,
it's based on one game. It's based on one game. The plus 41 scoring margin is based on game 2.
It hasn't felt like this talent should be a 2-2 situation. One of these teams is better than the other, period, in terms of talent. And the fact that this is 2-2 has come down to, like you're saying, Zach, a few late game heroics or boneheaded moves, depending on your perspective. Late inning plays by James Harden, to his credit, but also some missteps by the favored Boston Celtics. This series shouldn't be 2-2. That's what I'm saying. They should have won either game 1 or game 4, and this should be 3-1. But it is 2-2, and so I don't know. Well, they're playing with fire, so they have 3 games left, and they have Joel Embiid getting better and stronger, and James Harden, who's found the fountain of youth, at least outside of the paint, in this series. It's gonna come down to Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum asserting themselves in game 5 like they did. What was the lopsided game? Game 2?
Game 2, 121-87. Game 3 was also a double-digit win in the end for the Celtics. They pulled away. Tatum made 2 shots over Tobias Harris. They pulled away in that game too.
Yeah, they should be playing a little more with a little more pace, in my opinion, especially late in the games. They're younger, they're faster. They should be out there running and challenging Embiid and Harden to keep up with them. And they need to have another sort of double-digit win in game 5 to reassert themselves. Because to me, I picked the Sixers in this series before I really knew the extent of Embiid's injury. And now I feel like the Celtics are the better team. So hand up, that pick doesn't look good. I still think the Sixers are going to give them a problem here. But if I had to repick the series, I take
They are giving them a problem. It's 2-2.
It is 2-2. My thesis, though, Zach Lowe, is that it shouldn't be 2-2. And it's because of boneheaded plays and coaching in game 4 that we're talking about it being 2-2. Celtics should have won game 4. That's my hot take of the day.
I mean, yes and no, right? Like, it feels like that when you look at the end game from 102-98 all the way to the end. Yeah. But like the Sixers just fell apart. The Sixers had that game and their offense disintegrated into a puddle of nothing. And like, they should be on sort of higher alert for, can we get Tyrese Maxey more involved? Can we run some 2-man actions to get hit so he's not a bystander? Now, Tyrese Maxey cannot finish at the rim against the Boston Celtics to save his life. He is getting packed by their size every single time at the basket, but he's just a bystander on offense, and unless it's a fast break. And Boston's defense since game 1, this is what's more impressive about Philly winning this game. Boston's defense since game 1 has been pretty clean. Game 1, they had a bunch of mistakes, just fundamental dumb stuff. Philly took advantage. They stole the win on the road. Since then, Boston has played solid defense across the board. Philly had to win that game last night. Boston didn't give it to him. Before we project forward, I just want to shout out, you mentioned the PJ Tucker offensive rebound. I want to give him more love by going through a couple of forgotten overtime plays that people will not remember. Smart makes an and one layup to put Boston up 112-109 with 3:30 left. Sixers come down. Harden misses a step back 3. Tobias Harris and Smart jump together in a crowd. And I think it looks like they both get a hand on the ball, and Tobias kind of bats it to midcourt, and then it's a chase.
Mm-hmm.
And Marcus Smart wins that chase 75% of the time. He's on the floor, he's diving, he's doing his Marcus Smart stuff. Tobias Harris beat him to the ball and gave them another chance. They missed again. I don't actually know. I think it was a Joel miss. That was the first one. The second miss is the Harden miss. And if you freeze it when that shot goes up, it's PJ Tucker under the basket. Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, and Al Horford are like a Bermuda Triangle of guys whose only job is make sure PJ Tucker doesn't get the rebound. PJ Tucker goes baseline, maybe a foot out of bounds, and like rear ends Jaylen Brown to get inside position. They all jump for it at the same time. And it looks like both Tucker and Tatum and Brown, they all touch it. And the ball just like ricochets sideways off of Al Horford. They get another possession, and Embiid scores to put them within one. Those two offensive rebounds, those are tough as hell plays. Tobias Harris is not regarded as a tough as hell kind of player. The first one is him. The second one is PJ Tucker doing PJ Tucker things. But that's a toughness sequence. We are digging as deep as we can and getting as grimy as we can to stay alive, to claw our way back into this game at a point where Boston gets a stop and gets the ball up 3. They're a shot away from really kind of wresting control of the game. That sequence combined with the PJ Tucker offensive rebound, like those are real sort of staying alive kind of games plays.
I mentioned already I'm biased as Longhorn, but one of my favorite PJ Tucker scouting reports came from Chris Ogden, who was an assistant coach here with Rick Barnes when PJ was here in Austin. And he told me, he's like, PJ will break your hand if he has a chance to steal the ball. Like, and it's always stuck with me. And it's sort of tracked throughout his NBA career. There's not going to be a tougher guy on any court. He steps out. There's not going to be a meaner player. And now the sequence to me, again, that will get forgotten is that rebound and the pep talk of Joel Embiid. He is that toughness that the Sixers team hasn't had in many of those moments, by the way. If you look at recent Sixers playoff history, they could have used a PJ Tucker at a couple earlier parts of this Joel Embiid run.
The other one.
Yeah,
go.
No, we're still on PJ. It's you. I got something about.
No, we're not on PJ. I'm going to shout out another Philly toughness play from later, but you go on the PJ.
No, go
Tucker.
on. Go on.
Okay, so another one. A bunch of stuff happens, and Boston is still up 112, 111. Among the stuff that happens is the bogus charging call on Joel Embiid that is reviewed for 25 minutes, a Euro step charge. Can we just give the benefit of the doubt to the player who is gathering the ball? Joel's gathering the ball as Marcus Smart is still moving. Let's call that a blocker, a no call, and move on with life. Anyway, Boston up 112, 111. Harden misses a shot again, and another gritty toughness play. Joel Embiid's at the foul line. Al Horford has inside position on him, and Joel Embiid, who's exhausted as hell, who's getting beaten to all hell by everyone the Celtics throw at him, just physical, pounding. Basically like an NFL lineman swim move to get inside position on Horford, gets the rebound, goes right up, falling over, gets a foul call, makes both free throws to put him up 1. Just a gutsy, tough as hell play. What follows that is the chaos of Jason Tatum, who basically just threw Tyrese Maxey out of the way. And like Doc Rivers is right. Doc Rivers can get a little sanctimonious sometimes for my taste in his post-game and pre-game comments. He's right. If you're going to call that, like, if we're going to sit there and do a 10-minute review and conclude that Joel Embiid on a Euro step committed an offensive foul on Marcus Smart, you don't need a review to see that Jason Tatum just just gave him like a WWF forearm shiver. Like, that's a worse offensive foul than the one you called on the big fella. And then they win the game anyway, so all's fair and love.
Yeah, that's a great point. I remember watching it in real time, and in the context of the stuff that we had just had to endure with these replays, I mean, Tatum looks like the Heisman Trophy out there, and Maxey is the guy getting stiff-armed. Or alternatively, it looked like Mat Ishbia and Nikola Jokic with that same sort of chicken wing. But it did look like he was flopping. Like Tyrese Maxey, to me, I don't know what you thought, but I was like, no, he literally fell down. Like that was such a hard.
I'm gonna start like plopping onto my couch. I'm gonna do the Ishbia every time I plop onto my couch. Hey, honey, you ready to watch Succession? Whoa!
But yeah, it was egregious. Again, like 3-point shooters. I've written this in my book, and for years I've been a nag. But like the perimeter offensive players get so much benefit of the doubt. Like if you touch them as a defender, you give them 3 shots. But at the same time, they're allowed to freaking give you the forearm shiver like it's WWF Monday Night Raw. And you just have to sit there and deal with it. No, that's a charge. That shot doesn't go in if he doesn't first create space with that chicken wing. And that was going to be potentially a series defining shot. That was a great shot by Jason Tatum after he had committed a violation to get it. And yeah, we don't talk about that stuff enough when it doesn't end up being like the checkmate move of the game. But that was an egregiously missed call in a key moment. And Doc Rivers, like I agree, sanctimonious sometimes. He was right to bring that back up. That was a bad moment.
We're 4 games in. I don't know how many chess moves are left in the series, which is we always get to that point where there's been kind of an equilibrium reached. I thought in game 3, the Celtics took a page. The Raptors were the first team I really remember doing this to Harden on the Harden Embiid pick and roll specifically, which is to guard it in a way that basically encourages him to drive. Like the guy on Embiid will drop back, but kind of stick to Embiid. And they let him drive knowing we've got the second layer of defense waiting off PJ Tucker. No matter where PJ Tucker is, and Philly was smart trying to move him around to make this gambit a little harder for Boston. His guy, whoever it is going to be waiting there. So if you drive, we're letting you blow by the traditional second pick and roll defender because the third guy is going to be there. And it got into Harden's head. It was very obvious. The Philly fans were groaning at every kick out pass. He didn't want to shoot at the rim. He was confused. He was a little flummoxed. And I thought right away in game 4, he saw that same coverage. He saw Al Horford giving him an alleyway, and he had made up his mind, I'm taking it. If you're giving it to me, I'm taking it. And with like 2 minutes into the game, he saw Horford do it, said, I'm going right at you, bumped him, got it, like bumped him off and made a layup over him. And we saw that coverage here and there throughout game 4, but it was less dramatic, less extreme because Harden had a different kind of mindset out of it. We also saw Philly do something that I predicted they would do before game 3, which is play Maxey, Melton, and Harden more in 3-guard lineups just to get more shooting on the floor and not play more minutes without Tucker and without Jalen McDaniels, who did not play in game 4, to make spacing better and to make it harder for Boston to play Robert Williams. And if there's a pivot point that I'm interested in going forward, it's the Robert Williams minutes. Now, the 3 guards in Embiid are only -2 in 26 minutes, so it's not working super duper well. I understood why they did it. The Robert Williams chess match has been really interesting to me because Boston wants to play him with Grant Williams. They played him in game 4 a lot as the only big man on the floor, which is a lineup I like, but they go back and forth on how much they seem to like it. Ideally, they want him to either guard Paul Reed when Embiid's not on the floor or guard Tucker and McDaniels when one of them is on the floor so he can be a rover and not guard Embiid. And the Sixers, as soon as that setup is there, are removing it from Boston's toolbox. They will put Niang right in the game and say, you don't have a non-shooter to rove off. And there were a couple of possessions in game 4 where Robert Williams guarded Niang, and it was a disaster because Niang got a wide open 3. That's just not a kind of player that Robert Williams is accustomed to guarding. There were more possessions when he guarded Embiid one-on-one because he had nobody else to guard. And that's a bad matchup for him. They send more help there. Tobias Harris got an easy kick out 3. To me, if there's any sort of chess move left, it's surrounding those Robert Williams minutes because the Williams-Horford combination has essentially disappeared from the series. They played 1 minute together in game 4. They've played 7 minutes together the entire series. the plus minus with Time Lord on the floor is very good for Boston. That to me hasn't matched the eye test. I haven't loved his minutes in this series for all the reasons I'm ticking off right now. Um, that I don't know what the resolution to that is, but the Sixers have kind of, in a smart way, tried to play him out of the series, and the Celtics tried to force him back into it as the only big man on the floor. I just feel like in their guts that makes them nervous to not have Horford or Grant Williams out there with him for more defense, more just experience. I'm interested to see where that goes.
We knew that Missoula had an embarrassment of riches compared to other coaches in this playoffs. In which bigs are playing, which guards are playing. Time Lord is a great asset, but Horford, to his credit, as we saw in the fourth quarter, is doing a great job on Embiid. I want to go back to something else, like the Harden stuff. One of the craziest stats I've had looking at this Harden numbers, which are insane. Everybody's like, Anthony Davis, gosh, will you figure out which one you are? And it's like, well, James Harden's going incredible, bad, incredible. James Harden hasn't dunked a basketball in a game, Zach, since October. This dude is not terrifying in the paint anymore. His free throw numbers, his finishing numbers are way, way down. And that's an understatement. He can't finish in the paint. So to your point about the Nick Nurse defense, like, well, you couldn't do that in 2017, 18, 19. Now you can. And I think he had his best game in the paint. I was looking it up while you're talking. He was 8 for 11 in the paint in game 4. You know, in previous games, he's 1 for 6, 1 for 5. Getting Harden into the 2-point area, he's not getting the whistles because of some rule changes that he's used to. So I think that's something to watch. Is James Harden going to be able to score in the paint like he did in game 4, or was that an anomaly? Because the numbers all postseason long have been like, no, let that guy get in off the bounce and see what he wants to do once he's in there. Send help late. I think we even talked about that. So almost tempting Harden to drive is a defensive tactic we're seeing now that we would have not seen 5 years ago. And that is something that I think is really effective, regardless of which bigs are in there. We know Horford or Williams can protect the rim pretty well against James Harden at this stage of his career. But to me, it really comes down to whether Harden can do that 1 or 2 more times in this series. He's been the best scorer in 2 of these games, and those are the games that they've won. And that's come from great jump shooting from James, to his credit, and some good paint finishing this time. But I mean, bringing it back to your main point, how do the Celtics defend this? I don't know. Do you want to see more Time Lord? Is that what you're saying?
No, I don't know. I think their best look in this series, by the eye test, if not the numbers, has been with Horford at the 5, because he's done well enough on Embiid, and they've mixed up like an occasional double here, some shading, loading over here. And the big one is Embiid's got no one. He has to guard a perimeter player. And so the Celtics' best offense in this series, and I think their offense has been, they have 123 offensive rating for the series. They're playing the right way on offense. It's just either through off-ball screening or on-ball screening, get a good matchup for Tatum and Brown and drive the hell out of it. Maybe that's Harden. Maybe that's Tobias Harris, who's guarding Tatum to start games now. Maybe it's Tyrese Maxey, and just drive like all hell to the rim, because yes, they are a heavy 3-point shooting team, but they get those threes off drive and kicks. And when you drive and there's 5 out spacing, either the rim's going to be there or Embiid's going to be there and Horford's going to be open. And then you're in swing. I think Boston's offense, some hiccups in the late in game 1 and game 4, notwithstanding, the process has been correct, which is one of the reasons, again, I don't know what the chess moves really are, because I think their offense is playing the right way. Philly's offense, I like to see a little more juice, a little more life. But we know how they're going to play. It's going to be a lot of Harden pick and roll, a lot of Embiid isolations, a lot of Embiid post ups. Like that, we know who they are. So I don't know what else they're going to do.
I think that Boston needs to hit the accelerator, especially in the second half of these games. If you look at the pace numbers in clutch time, they're playing at a 1990s pace in crunch time. And, you know, like I said, James Harden and Joel Embiid are 2 marvelous players, but they're also 2 of the slowest guys in the league. when it comes going free throw line to free throw line at this stage. And the Celtics, I think, can find some easy buckets if they push the pace. And I think that last possession in overtime really embodied that, where Marcus is bringing it up and he's just going so slow. If I'm a Sixers coach, if I'm a Sixers fan, I'm like, yeah, go slow, guys. That's what we want. Our guys are slow. Let's play slow. So I think one thing that Missoula can do, and I've watched this over the next 3 games, is what's the pace of the Boston Celtics offense, especially when Joel Embiid and James Harden are on the floor.
It's a great point. Philly's transition defense is obviously a weakness. Their floor balance can get a little wonky when Harden drives and misses, and there's 4 guys below the foul line. The other thing Boston has done is clearly in game 3, especially, they have decided we're also going to make Joel work a lot on defense. We're going to put him in a lot of pick and roll, and we're going to attack him, and we're going to try to tire him out, which I think is smart. And he's been okay. He's averaging 26 a game in this series, which, given the numbers we've talked about, and that he averaged like 33 in the regular season, is a little low. 44% shooting. He has 7 assists and 8 turnovers. His individual numbers, if you look at his post-ups, he's averaging 1.24 points per direct post-up. That's when he shoots or passes to a teammate who shoots. That's great. You look at his ISOs, he's averaging 0.85 points per play. And sometimes an ISO blends into a post, blends into an ISO. So I think if you combine those 2 numbers, that's acceptable defense for Boston against Joel one-on-one.
But Joel's a moving target though right now, Zach. Like, I think, he shot 13 times in game. I'm sorry. In his first game back, he shot 9 times. So game 2, 19 times in game 3, 26 times in game 4. He's rounding back into form. Like, the Celtics, one of the reasons I think they may live to really regret not winning either game 1 or game 4 is Joel is rounding into form. And getting stronger as this series goes on. And even though he looked really tepid to me in the 4th quarter last night, now you're playing with fire, because that guy hasn't had his masterpiece game of this series yet. And if he has one in Boston, they can win. If he does a 48-point and 21 rebound game, like, none of us would be shocked. And that could switch this series and switch the fate of these Eastern Conference playoffs. So he's a moving target.
And I keep saying this, the stakes, even beyond this single season, could not be any bigger for both of these franchises.
Oh, man.
You have the Harden free agency looming. You have, how many times can you lose in this round if you're Philly? You have, what if Harden leaves? How do you replace him? What does Joel think of that? The teams with draft assets are watching. And in Boston, you have Jaylen Brown we're going to learn all NBA this week, is probably going to be eligible for a Supermax. And their whole slogan on their t-shirts is unfinished business. And if they lose in this round, how does that feel internally? How does that feel internally? Will they Supermax, or is it just boom, Supermax? Let's keep running it back. Maybe. I don't know. Those are the stakes when you get to this level.
Both coaching staffs too. Both coaching staffs really want to get through this series. I can tell you that. Because either whoever loses this, and we always talk about this during the regular season, there's going to be some very disappointed teams at the end of these rounds of the playoffs. But yeah, one of these organizations is going to make some changes if they lose this series.
Speaking of stakes, tonight, Lakers-Warriors, a Lakers win pushes us to is this the last dance for the Warriors? Where do they go from here? Discussion. We get to see how the Warriors adjust to what the Lakers did matchup-wise, and just another all-time Anthony Davis riding that Golden State yo-yo defensive performance, patrolling the paint, zooming out to the perimeter when he had to. How do the Warriors counter that? And the stakes there are obviously enormous. Arguably the greatest player of all time can sniff another conference finals appearance. And then Knicks Heat, Julius Randle's got to show up a little bit. That series has kind of been the fourth sister, so to speak, of this round. But you know, it's Knicks Heat, man. It's Knicks Heat. It's going to be. We almost had a kerfuffle in Game 3 when Cody Zeller and Julius Randle got tangled up, and Julius Randle fell, and they all kind of scrummed up, and Julius Randle laughed at him. Kirk Goldsberry, 2 more games tonight. Buckle up. It's getting fun in the NBA playoffs. Thanks for joining us.
Anytime, Zach. Thank you. Enjoy the games.